Love. Love is the easiest topic to preach about. In fact, all good sermons are in some sense about love. Love is the answer. All you need is love. Love makes the world go round. Love is a many-splendored thing. Love is the deepest human commitment, but it is also the most trivialized sentimental tripe. I love to love you, baby. I love to love you, baby. The love boat, exciting and new. 20th century theologian James Luther Adam wrote, "To preach love is at best bad taste, but to make cool and critical analysis of the phenomenon of love and to unmask pseudo-love, tasks that cannot be separated from each other, is an obligation that the psychologist and the minister have no right to avoid. God is love." So what is this thing called love? It's more than pleasure. It's more than self-gratification. It's not sex. It's not the biological imperative. It's a social construct, something that binds person to person. Edwin Lair wrote me a note this week, and he said it very well. Love is an exchange, an interaction between at least two minds. There is no mono-love. God, the Spirit of God, is an exchange. God, the Spirit of God, is an exchange, an interaction between at least two minds. There is no mono-God, no mono-Spirit of God. Relationship is at the core. This binding of person to person has many manifestations. Lover to lover, parent to child, friend with friend. It is, when we get down to it, what makes life worth living. It's no wonder that this positive aspect of human relations has been expanded to cosmic proportions. Early universalists were enamored by the idea that God is love. The 1803 Winchester Profession states, "We believe there is one God whose nature is love." This profession of faith has profound consequences. It seems pretty non-controversial. Almost all Christians would agree with it, up to a point. That point being that the concept of hell is incompatible with the notion of a loving God. Say this statement, and you will discover that a lot of people love hell more than they love God. People enjoy the notion that other people will suffer and they won't. Heaven would not be special if everyone got in. They would prefer a loving God or a judgmental God to a loving God, as long as the judgment is in their favor. But such a God is unworthy of reverence. As John Adams wrote to Thomas Jefferson, "He," meaning God, "created this speck of dirt and the human species for his glory, and with deliberate design of making 9/10 of the species miserable forever for his glory. This is the doctrine of Christian theologians in general, 10 to 1. Now, my friend, can prophecies or miracles convince you or me that infinite benevolence, wisdom, and power created and preserved for a time innumerable millions to make them miserable forever for his own glory? Wretch! What is his glory? Is he ambitious? Does he want promotion? Is he vain? Tickled with adulation? Pardon me, my Maker, for these awful questions. My answer to them is always ready. I believe no such things. In the election of 1803, John Adams was portrayed as the Christian running against the atheist, Thomas Jefferson. But I think John Adams' Christianity would be unrecognizable to many Christians today because he definitely was a Unitarian and a Universalist, believing that God is one and that all are saved. Hosea Ballou, another early Universalist, wrote, "If the Almighty, as we believe him to be, did not possess the power sufficient to make all creatures happy, it was not an act of goodness in him to create them." Basically, if God doesn't have the power to make people happy, why create them? If he has the power but possesses no will for it, it makes a bad matter as worse as possible. I then reduce my opponent to the necessity of telling me whether, if those whom he believes will be endlessly lost, be those whom God could save but would not, or those that God would save but could not. If it be granted that a God has both the power and the will to save all men, it is granting all I want for the foundation of my faith. If there is a hell, there is no way that God can be benevolent unless we change the meaning of the word benevolent. Quillen Shin was a circuit rider and a founder of many Universalist churches. And there was a lot of Universalists in the 19th century went around to town and held revivals. And there was even a Universalist church here early in the history of Lafayette. And one of the, Quillen Shin was one of those evangelists, circuit rider. And he said, Calvinism limits God's goodness. Simplified, it says God can save all men, but he does not want to. Arminianism, another type of Christianity, limits his power. It says he wants to save all men, but he cannot. Now then, when we limit God's goodness or power or wisdom, we make him an imperfect God. If God is not perfect, there is no God. So this is atheism. The doctrine of endless brutality, politely called eternal punishment, must be utterly abhorrent to every thinking mind, revolting to every benevolent instinct. It is a hideous, ghastly, fiendish doctrine, heart-paralyzing, soul-stifling. It makes God infinitely worse than Nero, his malignancy transcending of all the fiends of cruelty that ever lived. Those Universalist preachers were pretty fiery. The Unitarians, they were two separate denominations at the time, tended to be Harvard graduates, and put it a little bit more gently. James Freeman Clarke wrote in the Manual of Unitarian Belief, God is essentially love, and that he loves all his creatures, both bad and good. Clarence Skinner began the 20th century by saying, the Universalist idea is that of a universal, impartial, and immanent spirit whose nature is love. It is the largest thought the world has ever known. It is the most revolutionary doctrine ever proclaimed. It is the most expansive hope ever dreamed. And note in his definition, he defines God not as a person, but as a spirit. Not a judge, not even a loving father, but a spirit, closer to the ideal of love itself. The transcendentalist Emerson equated love with God, the superior that has no superior, the redeemer and instructor of souls, as it is their primal essence, is love. And humanitarian Albert Schweitzer said that the human experience of love is how we can know about God. The ethic of a reverence for life is the ethic of love widened into universality. So we have this history of love in our tradition. And it extends even from those who believe in God to the humanists in our tradition who do not perceive a God or a being. Kenneth Patton, whose words we read earlier about worshiping with our eyes and our fingers and all of our being, also wrote, "Our religion is as large as the inclusiveness of our understanding of love. Divinity is a style of poetry and prose, and divine love is in the arms of the human comforter. We see God as love, or love itself as the all-powerful force. We do not enter into the paradise of love by worshiping it. We enter by living in love." In other words, we do not praise the noun love. We are called to live the verb love. Love is action, a difference we try to make in the world. Buckminster Fuller, an architect and engineer who invented the geodesic dome, also a Unitarian, compared love to another force that holds the universe together. Gravity is a unit and undifferentiable. Gravity is comprehensive, inclusively embracing, and permeative. It is a non-focusable and shadowless, and omni-integrative, of which all characteristics of gravity are also characteristics of love. Love is metaphysical gravity. Amongst all those big words, I kind of see us as planets and bodies and stardust circling around each other in relationship to each other in ways that we don't quite understand. Gravity is a force of nature, a force often attributed to God, as in the song, "He's got the whole world in his hand," or the hymn, "How Great Thou Art." But the power of God was once thought to be able to arbitrarily suspend the laws of nature, stopping the sun in the sky, causing angels to fly, and people ascending into heaven. But eventually, humans came to understand gravity as a universal force. And so it is with love. Tribal gods love partially, destroying enemies and sustaining friends. But what if love was indeed universal? What if we were called to love even our enemies? Called to love those who believe differently from us? It would change how we understand love. It would change the very concept of God. Love becomes more than our day-to-day infatuations. It becomes attached to ultimate meaning. Charles Hartshorne, a UU Process theologian, argues that love is the way we participate with the holy. What the ultimate ideal means is that we should love people, ourselves included, as one person among many. One should love oneself for the sake of others, as truly as others for our own sake. To love, it should unite us, requiring us to search for what is the ultimate meaning of people and our relationships. It's hard to love enemies. It's hard to love those political people that I sit and watch TV and scream at every night. I have to remind myself of their humanity and all the wars and all the conflicts within your family and your friends, that annoying coworker, the person ahead of you in traffic, the homeless person you pass on the street, your doctor, the grocery clerk. To love is to believe that there is something that connects us all. To know at some level all of us love and want to be loved. Love is an act of will. It is a determination that whatever others may do, we choose not to exclude. We may not agree with the choices another person has made, but we cannot reject them as a person. People often try to defend against being hated by pretending that they do not need love. Needing love is seen as a vulnerability, and some try to appear invincible. But somehow we must peer above the ramparts of our fortresses and look beyond other people's defenses and find a reason to love. At the deepest level, this is an act of faith. If we wait for others to become lovable, we will be waiting a long, long time. It is up to us to have the strength to be loving. By loving people, we make them lovable. Loving is not sentimental. It is hard work. It is easier to be indifferent. It hurts less. But indifference is surrendering our power. Instead of acting with love in a proactive way, we react to how the world treats us. We do unto others as we have been done to. We surrender our free will and decide to just let others determine how angry we're going to be. Loving the universal connection between people is hard work. It's easier to hate. Hate is an attempt to exercise power, to take control of others, to do unto others before one is done unto. For those who are distressed by an uncertain world, hate is a pathway to certainty. If you hate others, you are almost guaranteed that they will hate or fear you. You presume they will reject you, and your behavior assures it. Selfishness leads to self-annihilation. The people you try to annihilate will try to annihilate you. The last person standing will not be able to reproduce, and thus will also die. Hate, if you want order in your life and you want predictability, hate is the way to go. Because if you hate, it's almost guaranteed you'll be hated in return. But I prefer the uncertainty and the chaos of love. Loving others will not guarantee that we are loved in return. But it connects us to a power greater than ourselves. Love is the creative energy. Biologically, this is true. But people do not make love only to make children. We create love in an infinite number of ways in order to connect with infinity. Love is not selflessness, but the giving of one's best self, giving one's highest self unto the world. It is finding true selfhood. Another Unitarian architect, Frank Lloyd Wright, wrote, "In what then to place one's trust as a worthy object for creative energy? Place it in nothing at all outside of one's own best self, nor place it in oneself either, unless there is something beyond selfishness there. Selfishness is selfhood degenerate. Selfhood is whole-minded and noble." I believe that love leads us to a universal selfhood. Love is not selfishness. Love is not a strategy to obtain love for oneself. Or we don't love God in order to get a reward in heaven. And love is not selflessness. It is not saying I have no value and I deserve damnation. Selflessness is martyrdom, dying for a cause. Selfhood is living for a cause. And one is asked to love one's neighbor as oneself, one has to have a certain amount of self. If one feels worthless, then to love another person as you love yourself is to treat them as being worthless. We have to love ourselves in order to love others. Selfhood is living for a cause. It is choosing to create good in this world. To love one another as one loves oneself is to love the universal self that unites us all. If our body dies, it is the love that we have lived that will remain. This is a church that allows and even encourages many beliefs about what is ultimate or about what is God and what is the nature of what is true. And that freedom is rooted in love. I don't care what inspires you to love. And I know I, like many of you, sometimes have days where God seems probable and other days when God seems impossible. But rather, whatever the state of my faith on a given day, I know I still should love.